Sarcoma Stories is a podcast created by Sarcoma Foundation of America to highlight the voices and experiences of patients, survivors, and care partners. After listening, be sure to join our Sarcoma Stories podcast Facebook group to connect with the community and discuss the episode. Follow us and enable notifications on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss new episodes. You can also find all episodes and information on this subtype or your subtype on SFA's website, curesarcoma.org. Links are in this episode's description. Hi, I'm Tasha, one of your Sarcoma Stories hosts. Today, I'm introducing this episode a little differently because this sarcoma story is mine. In March of 2022, I was diagnosed with embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma, and we're sharing a bit today about what that experience was like, what survivorship has been like, and we're talking about something I've been working on for the cancer community, along with some transitions happening at SFA. I have to give a big shout out to all of our guests, past and future. I know it takes an incredible amount of vulnerability to share your sarcoma stories, and now having been in the guest hot seat, I know what that feels like. I also want you to know I have personally learned invaluable lessons from every single one of our guests, and I truly believe in the power of storytelling to help each other as humans as we navigate our own personal stories. So without further ado, here's my sarcoma story, and I look forward to sharing the stories of others with you moving forward. Let's dive in.
Welcome to our next episode of Sarcoma Stories. I am Brandy, and usually I introduce myself as Brandy, your other host. But today I'm introducing this episode because Natasha is actually the guest rather than the host today. And we are in the time of some transitions with the podcast as well as transitions in life. And Natasha is transitioning out of her role at SFA, which I'm sure we'll get into in this podcast, and moving on to do some amazing thing with her sarcoma experience. But we also want to introduce Katie, who will be a new host as part of the podcast because I am transitioning out as the other host of the Sarcoma Stories podcast. And you might know Katie Wintergerst because she has been interviewed in the Sarcoma Stories podcast. She was also a Courage Award honoree. She has also been the co-chair of the Louisville Race to Cure Sarcoma, but she is now transitioned into a position at SFA as well. So welcome, Katie. Glad to be handing over the Sarcoma Stories hosting duties to you. So glad you're here to join us today. And especially in this time of transition for us to interview Natasha for this important episode.
Thanks, Brandy. I'm really excited to be taking a bigger role with the Sarcoma Stories podcast. And we'll still have Natasha around too to work on this with us. So, Natasha, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for being here with me today. I'm so excited to host this together. I'm so excited for you to continue this series with us. I'm excited to be in the hot seat today. Now I'm nervous. Now I understand what our guests go through.
Well, I'd love to start us off kind of how you have started off so many episodes. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your sarcoma journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me before we talk about the sarcoma. I am 34 years old. I live in the North Shore of Boston. Love this area. I love the outdoors. I love a good cappuccino. Love my friends. Love my community. I am obsessed with my dog. He's a Yorkie named Simba. He is the star of my life. I love making friends. I love humans. I love how humans think and talk and get to know each other. So that's probably why I love hosting this podcast. But I always say I'm a connector by nature. So that's just kind of like my thing, is I just love people.
And I think most people who have listened to this Sarcoma Stories consistently and also follow you on social media know how much connecting that you actually do in your life. Can you talk now about your sarcoma journey and something you said in the survey? So, just a little background on how we do Sarcoma Stories. We actually ask the guests to answer some questions before they join, so we can get a little bit of background. And we talk and we ask them topics they'd like to talk about. And then in the past, Natasha and I would think of topics that out of that survey and questions that we asked that we would want to talk about. And so we had Natasha, even though we know her and have worked with her for many years, we asked her to fill out the questions as well. And in that background, she mentioned her very quick journey from diagnosis to treatment, which I think is really an important thing to discuss and what that was like for you. You can talk
Yeah.
about your whole journey, but I think that's a really interesting because I don't think I really fully understood the quickness with that turnaround.
Yeah. Totally. Now, being 4 years out, I think every minute on Earth, there's a new addition to the story. So it's getting longer, right? Because a part of that journey is survivorship. But the diagnosis journey, in hindsight, was so quick, felt so long going through it, but it wasn't. It was 2 months. I was diagnosed March of 2022. However, my symptoms showed up January 2022. And I was the kind of symptomatic where it wasn't like it was a just a lump that was painless. I had symptoms, but like they were disguised as cold symptoms. So it was a sore throat that wouldn't go away. My COVID tests are negative. My strep test was negative, all of that. And I know every time I say that when I'm sharing this story, people are like, oh my gosh, sore throat. Like every time I have a sore throat, I'm going to be afraid. And I'm like, it wasn't just that it was a sore throat, it was a one sided sore throat that was developing into a mass. Antibiotics didn't fix it. They originally thought it was an abscess or an infection, which they tried to drain and it bled, and abscesses, they're not supposed to bleed. So there were signs, and it was very clearly symptomatic from the beginning. Initially, it wasn't wrong to think that it was an abscess. It was just wrong to then continue on the path of wait and watch when antibiotics didn't work, when it was bleeding, when they realized it was just unilateral. It was pretty clearly showing signs that a biopsy or further testing should happen. They did do a CT when I first presented that showed something, but that's what they thought was the abscess. So initially it was okay to think it was an abscess. It just should have been biopsied a lot sooner. However, I was told by 4 different medical professionals initially, I'm too young for it to be anything serious. I was 29 at the time of presenting. I was too young for cancer. They said that specifically, you're too young for cancer, and we would just like to wait and watch. In that wait and watch period, it did continue to grow. They tried to drain it, what they thought was the abscess. It bled and it wouldn't stop and turned into this like very massive blood clot that they ended up having to surgically go in and debulk, is what they say, but also then cauterize the bleed. However, they were operating on what they didn't know was a tumor, which isn't fantastic. So that surgery was really tough to recover from. That was March 15th, 2022. I remember, is the day after Valentine's Day. And they told me to go heal like it was a tonsillectomy. They didn't remove the tonsil because they didn't want to cause further bleeding. And for context, my tumor was in my right pharyngeal space, which is essentially your right tonsillar area. So I was told to go home to heal 3 weeks as it was a tonsillectomy. And in that time, I kept looking at it in the mirror in the back of my throat. And I was like, there's something there. It's swollen, it's red, it looks angry. It doesn't look like how they told me it should be healing. And I marched myself over to the doctor every 2 days. I lived in Boston at the time. I lived behind a hospital in Boston, and I would walk over without an appointment. And I would say, hey, I just had surgery here and this looks wrong. Like, I need someone to look at it. And they would, but it was still like wait and watch, wait and watch, wait and watch. And I was like, what are we waiting and what are we watching for? And that was 3 weeks of that. It got to be almost March by that time, and I was still being told to wait and watch while watching a mass grow in my throat.
Yeah, I think it's important here because when we talk about the 2 months that you went through, which many people, it takes a lot longer, but the
Mm-hmm.
reason yours was 2 months, and that's from time of presenting to time of diagnosis. Then we'll get into the time that you had to make
Yeah,
decisions from the time where you finally found out what it was to you started treatment. But the self advocacy, I think that's
right.
a very important point of your story that you have
Yeah.
talked about so much, but is a real clear example of you had to really advocate for yourself.
Yes. Well, I honestly have had a lot of guilt around that. There's so many reasons why it's hard to advocate for yourself. And I make it sound easy when we're talking about it now. Like I marched myself over there every 2 days. But I mean, I felt insane. I felt crazy. I was like, they are going to think I'm annoying. They are going to just turn me away. I was convinced that that would happen. I was like, I'm being a bitch. Like I'm just walking in there who do I think I am to have the right to just walk into a hospital and say, hey, you need to look at this? But at the same time, this is why I think there's so much value in telling your story. It was the stories of other people in my brain that I was like, well, I got to do my due diligence. Like, worst case, I have something really wrong with me and I want to know and I can take care of it. And best case, I'm just a really annoying person that the doctors are like, oh, it's her again. And then I go on and live my life. But it's my life and I would like to live it. And, I really didn't think anything was wrong. I was like, I just am frustrated. Like, I don't feel good. I was taking all of my sick time. When we talk about the self advocacy part of my story, it's like, oh, that was so courageous of you. How'd you know to do it? And I was like, I didn't. I just was scared. Like, I was scared and I didn't know what was going on and I didn't feel good. And I just think on some level, I had a gut feeling, but I felt awful. I felt like I was taking up valuable time that the doctors could be seeing other patients, and I didn't feel good about it. And I think that's something when it comes to self advocacy we should talk about, because it's not like you feel like this valiant hero when you're doing it. You feel oftentimes really bad about it. And it's really challenging. And also sometimes feel like you're being gaslit. I was like, there's visually something wrong with me. If you looked in my throat, you could see this mass that was bloody and growing. And I remember phrases that I was said. You're too young for cancer. We don't know what's wrong with you, but we'd love to do a case study on you one day, which I was like, if you want to do a case study on me, then there must be something serious. But you're also telling me I don't need a scan. So, like, which one is it? And that was when I was like, I need another opinion. And the only reason I thought you need another opinion is because of other patient stories I had heard before me where they were like, a second opinion is important. Now, mind you, this was going to be my fourth opinion. So I was like, okay, I guess I need a fourth opinion because the first three aren't telling me anything. And that was when I got my fourth opinion. I was at that appointment told, again, this isn't cancer. I wasn't even thinking cancer. That's how far it was from my mind. But that doctor looked me straight in the eye and said, this is not cancer. I'm a tonsil cancer doctor. I see cancer in the head and neck all the time. This is not it. And he turned to my partner at the time and said, but you should be concerned because tonsil cancer is rising in men. And I was like, hello, I'm here with, I have something in my throat. Can we please talk about me, the patient? And people ask sometimes, like, do you think you were dismissed as a woman? And I was like, maybe. I was a young female. And like, I don't know why the doctor wasn't taking me seriously and talking to my male counterpart instead of me when I was sitting in the chair. But I was like, yeah, no, like, what do I do about this? And the resolution was wait and watch. And I left that appointment. I remember sitting in the car and I was like, that's not good enough. Like, this is not good. Like, I can't just take that. And I need to see somebody else.
Were you up to this point under the care of a primary care physician, general surgeon? Like, kind of what types of groups were you seeing? Because you don't have a
Yeah,
diagnosis at this point.
didn't have a diagnosis. I had seen my primary care, and that was who sent me. So, back up to like the very first opinion, it was an ER visit because I had gone to my PCP after 2 weeks of begging for that appointment. The ENTs who saw me and had just done surgery on me, they were kind of the ones leading the charge at that point. So my PCP was kind of checking in, but I wasn't really getting a lot of guidance. It was very, very self-directed.
What you said about self advocacy is really important too for people because we
Yeah,
do at SFA and even across cancer, quite frankly,
yeah,
we promote self advocacy. Like you have to advocate for yourself, but it is scary to do. So I'm glad you brought that up because it is something that is not taken lightly. When we say you have to advocate for yourself, it's not because it's an easy thing to do. It is a very scary
yeah,
thing to do. You are brave, but in the moment,
yeah.
you're right. You feel really like a bad person for trying to
Yes.
save yourself.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, the thing is, if you're not doing that, who is going
Right.
to do that? The way I always describe self advocacy to people to try and explain the patient perspective of what it feels like to self advocate is it's like drowning, and you are drowning and you look up and you see the sunlight from the surface and you're looking at it and you're like, that's so close. I see it there. I can get there. I just have to swim up, but as you're doing that, you're like, ooh, the surface is further away than I thought it was. And I'm losing air. I'm losing air and I'm drowning and I'm sinking. And I need someone to reach down and pull me up, but they can't hear me down here. They're not seeing it. And I have to keep trying to swim up and up and up to get to that sunlight on the surface. And it is exhausting and defeating. And when I think of self-advocacy, I get a pit in my stomach. So anytime anyone's ever called me brave for doing it, I always feel like I'm going to throw up, because I'm like, it was exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting. And to be that exhausted to look for a diagnosis and then have to gear yourself up for all of the treatments you need to do once you get a diagnosis is exhausting. But it's so necessary if you want to get to the start line of whatever it is you need to do once you have the diagnosis.
How did you ultimately get diagnosed?
I called my dad on the way home from the fourth doctor, tonsil cancer doctor, and his friend is an ENT, agreed to see me, and immediately was like, something's wrong. I'm not the person for this, though. I know you need serious care, and I need you to go to the ER, suggested an ER that I go to. And got admitted to the ER. They scoped me. I mean, at this point, this lump in my throat is now almost blocking my airway. It grew very rapidly. And so my diagnosis, I don't think I've even said it, is embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma. So it was almost blocking my airway, and they admitted me to the ICU. That was a Saturday night, and Sunday morning, the surgeon arrives. Happened to be that this veteran head and neck cancer doctor was on shift that day. So they prepped me at 3 a.m. I remember them going over all of the things with me about like medical proxy. They did a surgery. The point wasn't to clear margins. It was to debulk so I could breathe and function. I couldn't eat at this time either. So I was dropping weight pretty quickly. And the goal was to debulk it to make me more comfortable and for them to collect enough tissue to biopsy, which I didn't really understand that at the time. I just knew that they were trying to help me. So they did the surgery. It turns out that 90% of my tonsil had become necrotic, which is just dead tissue. They basically did a tonsillectomy and took whatever else they could to biopsy. And I remember, I think this is always important because talk about how exhausting self-advocacy is. I remember the surgeon walking into my room to take me back from the ICU. And I mean, I wasn't looking forward to surgery, but he came in with his mask. All I could see was his eyes. And I just remember him looking at me and going, Natasha, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to take as much tissue as I can. And I'm going to do a biopsy and I'm going to figure out what this is. And I just was like, I'm so safe. It feels like someone just put a safety blanket around me and just like held me. And I was like, oh, this is not good, but like, this is so good. And we'll never forget that moment. So came out of the surgery. And I remember him looking at me again. His eyes were so kind, just so much genuine kindness. And he just said, you know, this isn't the end. There's going to be more. I want you to be prepared for that. But right now your job is to rest from the surgery and we'll have an appointment in about a week. And I want you to take care of yourself. And I was like, great, my birthday's coming up in 2 weeks. He's got it. Probably got some autoimmune disease, but it's fine. I'm turning 30 in 2 weeks. I got to go home and rest and get my strength up so that whatever this new lifestyle is I'm going to live, I'm ready for it. I was not thinking cancer. And so that's what I did. I went home. The thing about tonsils is that when you get them removed, they can bleed, and that's a risk post-surgery. So they warn you, if you go home and you bleed, come back to the ER. And I remember being like, well, how much blood? And they were like, you will know. Night before my outpatient appointment where they discussed the biopsy, I'm playing Wordle in bed. This is like the time when Wordle was really big. And I just like, I remember playing Wordle a lot throughout this process. Ask me if I've played Wordle since. No, not one bit. But I just remember playing Wordle and suddenly felt this pop and very, very nauseous. When they say, you know, you will know if your tonsil is bleeding. Get rushed to the ER. I'm passing out on the way because I'm losing blood. Brought me back to the ER and they said, we're keeping you overnight. And I was like, my appointment tomorrow. Don't worry, they'll come to you. I just remember looking out the window, watching the sunrise over Boston. Shortly after that, my surgeon walks in and my appointment was at 1. He comes in the morning and I was like, well, this can't be good. He's here before clinic. And so he comes in and same kind eyes. And he goes, I'm 99% sure you have a malignant tumor. And my parents have worked in oncology my whole life. So I knew malignant wasn't a great word. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, okay, what are we talking here? And he was like, well, you know, it's rare. 1% of adult patients get this kind of cancer called a rhabdomyosarcoma. I was like, you're gonna have to spell that for me. I have no idea what this is. And he was like, it's pretty aggressive. And I was like, oh, geez, like having parents in oncology, I've imagined myself getting diagnosed with cancer. I knew it was a possibility in life, but I had never expected it to be like, it's aggressive. This is where they started talking to me about subtypes, and depending on which subtype you have is going to depend. That's what your course of treatment is going to relate to. And they really went in with the patient education right away, which I appreciated. But I was like, okay, well, wow, okay, I have a rare cancer. And that was all I could think of is like, wow, I have a rare cancer.
It may be worth calling out too, just for people that don't know, there within rhabdomyosarcoma there are
Yes.
separations, right?
This was a big question mark because at the time my biopsy came back, they told me that it was rhabdomyosarcoma and that they were still waiting for confirmation on which subtype of rhabdomyosarcoma it was. So I get diagnosed, and it was like 36 hours of what are we going to do? What is my prognosis potentially going to be? When they told me my diagnosis, and he said, do you have any questions? I said, what's my prognosis? And he said, do you really want to know? And I said, I don't know. Do I want to know? I've never done this before. And he said, Natasha, I don't think it's worth you knowing a number because one, you're a person, you're not a number. And two, it's so rare. Do
Right.
you want to pin it on a number? Is knowing a number going to change how you want to move forward? And I said, not really. And he goes, I don't think it's worth it for you to know it then. And I said, I think you're right. And I just thought that was empowering to give that to the patient in the moment of like, here's a diagnosis that's really scary. What's going to be helpful to you? If that's going to help you, I'll tell you. But if not, is that going to change how you go forward? And I said, no. And he said, then it's up to you if you want me to tell you or not. And I said, I don't want to know. So I didn't know my prognosis for most of treatment. I just didn't know the stats around it. And I felt really comfortable with that. I was like, it's not going to change my mindset, how I decide to treat this.
I think that's a good point too. When you think about what do people want to know, right? Will that just
Right.
affect their mindset as they're going through it? And the whole time that affects their mental health, because who does know really?
You
You don't
don't.
know where you're going to land in the statistics. And you
No.
really don't know. Each person, everyone's journey is different. Each person is different. Everybody's response to treatment is different. Every case is different. So that's a good point. If you want to know, you want to know. If you don't, you don't. And if it's going to change the decisions that you make, then it's important to know. And again, that should be up to the patient. And that's really
Right.
interesting that he said that.
I think it's a part of the shared decision making too. And also, you know me, I'm also not saying ignore everything because I'm very big on educating yourself as a patient so you can be an active participant in your care. So, not to get it misconstrued, like saying I didn't want to know the prognosis was not at all like I don't want to know anything about this. I needed to know the information I needed to know. It was just you have to make so many decisions as a patient, and some of them are made for you, but there's so much information that you have to take in. What of the information that you have control over is and is not going to be helpful? And so for me to be like, I have to wrap my mind now around going through a year of treatment. I knew I had so much that was on my plate that I was like, I'm going to really need my focus here. I'm going to have to focus on the important parts of treatment and all the things I need to do to hopefully get to the other side of this, like what information is not going to be helpful. And I put up a massive boundary around that. And it was the first thing upon meeting every doctor. I said, hey, I'm really involved in my care. I will communicate with you about everything. However, I do not want to know my prognosis. Please don't tell me. And there was only one doctor who didn't that boundary. And it was incredibly manipulative. It was not great. And it ruined my mindset for a few days. Like I remember really needing to be talked back into like, you have a shot at getting to the other side of this after that. So like it can really impact your mindset, and the patient's boundaries really do need to be respected around that. But all that to say, like it is still so important to be active in your care. Being a participant in your care is so important. So it was just a matter of being like, this information is not going to be helpful. I'm the body that has to go through this, but I do want you to tell me this, and I need you to know that I'm feeling this way. What do we do about this? And with my team, we worked together on what information I needed to know.
And now you finally got diagnosed and how quickly you went into treatment. People do usually move into treatment pretty quickly, but yours was very quickly. 48 hours. So talk about
Yeah.
how did that happen and how did you make the decision? Because for me, it seems like I would feel like, do I have all the information I need to make those decisions?
Yeah.
I was going to say, and too, you have been on such a crash course here.
Hmm.
Like, how are you making decisions, and what is your support system like too? Because
Yeah.
you've been through a lot. Your body's very taxed in such a
Hmm.
short period of time.
Yeah, March 22nd was my diagnosis. March 24th was my first day of chemo. And so I was already inpatient because of that tonsil bleed. So they kind of just transferred me right to the
Mm.
oncology unit. So I got introduced to my oncologist day one. So, like, he was the person I met right after I got diagnosed. And right away, he walked into the room and said, "My plan is to blast this thing into the stratosphere." And I said, "Wow, I like you. This is the attitude I want treating me." Like, that is a direct quote. And I was like, "Great, let's do it." I didn't know this at the time, but I was diagnosed at a sarcoma center. So, like, that was also helpful in the way that this all moved forward. I did understand, though, that second opinions are important. And again, this is from patient stories. I remember reading patient stories that had nothing to do with sarcoma, but people would talk about how important second opinions are. So I looked at my oncologist and I said, "I really like you. I don't want you to be offended because I actually really think I want to be in your care, but do you would you I just need to get a second opinion before we start this." And he was like, "That sounds good to me. I can recommend some people. This is how I plan to treat it." And then he kind of explained a bit about who of his colleagues he's talking to like really come to the conclusion of what chemos he's going to give me and whatever. And so I was like, okay, there's like more eyes on this than I thought. I'll start this treatment with you, and like I'll get another appointment after I'm out. It's hard to say that like I just decided to go forward because it kind of was like so urgent that I needed to go forward. Like there wasn't really a lot of like, do you want to go to the oncology floor? It was like, we're transferring you, we're starting you on these chemos, and like if you change your mind after that, okay. But I don't know. There wasn't a lot of like, should I think about this chemo? There was also the exhaustion of looking for an answer, and then I had finally had one. I was just ready. I was like, okay, we know what it is. Let's do this. Like I have been for 2 months nonstop searching for an answer, and now we finally have an answer, and I just want to start. So it was a combination of you're urgent and also me being like, how soon can we put this chemo in my body? Because I want to get going. But the other thing I think is worth mentioning, even before we got to the chemos, my oncologist said, "Do you want a family?" And I was like, "Do I want a family?" I was like, well, I mean, I'm 29. I've turned 30 in 2 weeks. There's been a global pandemic. I've already been like really questioning what I want in my future. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't think so, but maybe. And I was like, why are you asking me this? Like, I have cancer. What are you talking about? And he very honestly, and I really appreciate this, was like, the chemos that we'll give you will likely impact your fertility. We would normally recommend doing egg retrieval so that you later have the option. But to be quite frank, you don't have the time for that. That takes a few weeks. You have to do the hormone
Yeah.
shots, and
Yeah.
at the rate at which my tumor was growing, because this had been 1 week, and the time from that surgery where they debulked it and did the biopsy to now, it had already grown back. So they were like, we are very, very
Wow.
concerned at how fast this is growing, and we really need to get you into treatment. As soon as they confirmed which subtype it was, they wanted to start chemo. And this was the conversation we had about the future family planning. Is he did say to me, if this was your dream, if this was all you wanted in life, I'd be willing to have a conversation with you, but I would want you to know we really need to get you into treatment. It's not the choice I want you to make. However, if it's the choice you want to make, we can talk about it. And I thought that was also very empowering. That he wasn't making the decision for me, but was guiding me as a professional. And I said, I am so in limbo. And right now, it feels like if there's no me, there's no future family. So I would rather just start getting treated. And I totally respect what anybody would do in that situation. But for me personally, I was like, I just want to start, and like whatever happens, happens. And it's not worth it right now for me to go through that. I still had the conversation with a fertility specialist to discuss Lupron shots throughout chemo. And the theory with that is that maybe if you put your ovaries to sleep during treatment in
Right.
chemical menopause, that's what Lupron is that maybe it preserves their function. There's not a lot of good evidence on that. We still did it. It didn't work for me. I'm in chemo-induced menopause, so I'm not on Lupron shots anymore, but I am in chemo-induced menopause and survivorship. It was nice to know, like, we checked the box, even though it wasn't information you want to hear. In hindsight, would have I liked to have the option? Absolutely. I would have loved to have been able to do retrieval and just now in survivorship have that option if I want it. It is something I've had to grieve in that time. Like, even if I wasn't 100% that I wanted kids, I kind of had to grieve that the choice was taken from me. But at the end of the day, I did understand how quickly we needed to get me into treatment. So it was very fast, a lot of whiplash, a lot of quick decision making. Katie, you asked what was my support system. My sister had flown in from Chicago. It just happened that she had flown in that morning. And then we get the diagnosis. So she was here. And I had a friend who had been going through her own diagnosis for the 2 years prior. I called her right away. And then I had another friend who was a 10-year survivor. I called him right away. So I had some friends who had been through cancer and called them right away and just was like, oh my God, what do I do? And felt like I had people in this club that no one wants to be a part of that I could turn to almost immediately. And then I kept it kind of close for the first few hours and called people who were my close friends just to tell them, because 2 months of being sick, people knew I wasn't well, but I finally had an answer and wanted to share with my close friends. So they stepped up pretty quickly. But the other piece, and we'll get to this at some point in the episode, but like I teach Pilates and I teach bar and yoga, and I have communities from that of the studios I've taught in, and they all stepped up extremely quickly. And that was an incredible support. But honestly, in those first 48 hours, I was looking to my team for support. I was like, you're all the experts in this. I need you to guide me. It sounds like we're going to be spending a lot of time together. So I very quickly imprinted on my team. I was like, you all are who I trust. And I think having so many opinions that I didn't trust leading up to that point made it a seamless transition into finally having a team I felt taken care of by. And I was like, oh, I trust you guys. We need to work on this together here because my goal is to live. So that was who my support was in the first 48 hours.
You being diagnosed as a young adult and AY. And we talked a little bit about the fertility in the sense of how quickly you had to move. And that's just one piece of the journey of survivorship, especially from a young adult. During your journey, the medical professionals saying you're too young to get cancer, which we hear from the AYA population quite a bit. You came to us also as a young adult and really helped us start our AYA committee and really trying to get our outreach to the AYA community, because in sarcoma, there's a real gap for that in the sarcoma space. And we have a huge AYA population. But can you talk a little bit about that with that experience for you as an AYA in the sarcoma community and the things that you're dealing with now in survivorship?
Totally. There's the typical like life interrupted, to quote Suleika Jaoud, if anybody hasn't read her book Between Two Kingdoms, amazing. But that's what she talked about, is like life interrupted. You're in the middle of your life and it gets interrupted. And so like your family planning, your career path, your college degree, your high school dating, like all of these things get interrupted. I had to figure out dating post treatment, which there is no information on that. In the world of dating apps, what an experience. It was really strange because even without thinking about dating, like, what is something you get asked every time you meet someone new? What do you do for work? Okay, well, how do I explain to someone I'm out of work because I just did chemo for the last 10 months? Like, every time I met a new person, dating or not, it was just like, how do I explain to people? We touched on this a little bit with the fertility stuff, and I mentioned I'm in menopause now, which I thought my fertility conversation at the start of treatment was well done. So I'm very grateful. But I wish they talked more about what to expect from menopause at age 30. I wish I had known how challenging that was going to be, and with health implications post treatment. I'm on hormone replacement therapy now, and it's not just for the hot flashes, which are terrible, but it's also for my bone health and my cardiac health. And that's something that I have to live with for the rest of my life until I reach an appropriate menopause age. There's so many things, every little thing that comes up. I mean, dental health was another one. I couldn't go to dental appointments when I was in treatment. Plus, I had head and neck radiation. My dental appointments are intense now. I sometimes have to go more than twice a year. So there's just so many little things about survivorship, and that's just a few of mine. But it's physical, it's health, it's social, it's emotional, anxiety, depression. Like, of course, I have this anxiety that everybody has. Um, every little thing is just, is it back? What is this? And future planning has taken me so long to even get remotely comfortable. I wouldn't even say I'm fully comfortable, but like remotely comfortable with engaging in the idea of a future. It's hard to plan for the future because that's been ripped away before. So everything comes with this toll of just like, okay, I got to do hormone replacement therapy to prevent osteoporosis. If I age, hopefully, I hope I age into an age where I'm worried about osteoporosis. Like, it's just crazy the mental gymnastics you're constantly doing. Returning to work was a big one. I had to figure out how to get back into a career. I think another piece is going from the care of my parents to the care of myself again. That was a massive shift in both directions. Going into your parents' care as a 30-year-old is difficult and challenging. And then going out of their care again, we went through a period where I was like, you have to give me space again because I have to learn to be independent again. And it's a lot for the family too. I mean, it's like a shared trauma. It's even taken me now. I thought I did a good job processing in real time. And 4 years later, I'm like, oh, there's still so much to process. So it's just constant. Life is never the same after. However, it's still very full. So it's both. I've very much learned that you hold joy and pain in the same hand all of the time.
Yes, that's very true all of the time. And now here you are today, 4 years later. Where are you in your
Yeah.
journey today?
So I did 14 rounds of chemo, 7 weeks or 35 sessions of radiation. There's so many labels. And so when people ask me what I am, I hate the word survivor. It's just a term. So I usually say treated and stable. Now scans every 6 months, and I am seen by an ear, nose, and throat doctor to clinically look at it. There's damage in my mouth from radiation and the side effects from that. So they just like to keep a close eye on things. But yeah, still stable. And how many years are we now? We're 4 years from diagnosis. End of May will be 4 years from end of radiation. And then this coming December will be 4 years out of treatment officially. So depends on who you talk to. I say I'm 4 years, but my doctor would say 3.5.
Well, that's fantastic. And you mentioned that you being a Pilates instructor, and I know when you came on board with SFA, you were
Mm-hmm.
still doing that even when you worked at SFA. I know we've talked a lot about this, and something that I know that's very important to you is while you were going through all of this, there was something that sort of got you through it. So talk about that because part of your transition, while you'll still do work with SFA and in the sarcoma community, you've also sort of launched a new initiative. So talk about that and how important that was to you in your sarcoma journey as well and as you were going through it.
For me, movement is life. My mom will say when I was in utero, she used to watch her stomach do this wave. And she was like, you were always dancing. It was like I could literally see my stomach do this wave. And when I was feeding as a baby, if there was music on, I would bop to the beat of the music while feeding. I did not stop moving. So, quite literally, I've been moving since birth. I began dancing at the age of 2, danced my whole way through high school, my grade school, everything. I've been moving forever. Movement is vital, is what makes me feel most connected to my body. It makes me feel most like myself. It's where I get energy. It is where I process emotions. So I began teaching and I was doing that at the time of my diagnosis. So at the start of treatment, I said to my doctor, I'm not teaching right now, obviously, but like, can I still take class? Can I still move? What's safe? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Movement's great. There's so much research on how beneficial exercise can be during cancer treatment. It can help your fatigue, your nausea, keep you from deconditioning, all this stuff. Do it, so much encouragement. And I was like, heck yeah, like let's do it. Awesome. I can't wait to go take class. I'll feel like myself again. And oh, did I underestimate how badly I would feel. I was absolutely shocked at the body I was living in all of a sudden. I can't even describe the experience, but simply living in my body every day woke up feeling trapped. Like I just remember this sensation of waking up and being like, what I would give to just get out of bed without struggle. Like that was it. It was like the bar was so, I mean, I had always imagined, and people ask you, like, what's your bucket list? And I was like, F the bucket list. I just want to stand up. I just want to stand up and feel strong in my body. That's all I want. And I was like, there's got to be a way. And so, I mean, I had a feeding tube during treatment, which also made movement a little bit difficult. You can't do a lot of rotation. You can't lay on your stomach. And I think, honestly, as a movement educator, I felt stuck in my body, and I also just felt paralyzed of like, what is even safe for me? I don't know, but I'm supposed to know this because I'm a professional. But like, now I got to apply it to myself, and what the heck? And as an instructor, I know modifications for so many injuries I've helped people move through. And then for myself, I was like, I just can't figure it out. So I honestly gave up for a little while. I did have something called foot drop during treatment, which impacted how I walked. And so right away, they were like, let's put you in physical therapy. And my physical therapist gave me some exercises that I was like, one, completely defeated because it was things I used to do no problem, like lift your heels off the ground. I couldn't, in a seated position, even lift my toes off the ground. And I just remember being like, in bar, BARRE, you stand on your toes with your heels really high and do your exercises. And it was like, how am I supposed to teach this ever again? So I just remember being totally defeated until she gave me this one like side lying thing. And I was like, oh, I do this in Pilates. This is side lying series. And she was like, are you motivated to do Pilates? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, well, could you go home and do 10 minutes of Pilates? Like, I would rather you do that if you're motivated to do it. And I have two really wonderful friends who are also practitioners, and they both were vital in me having something to practice. One had these 10-minute videos I would do and was like, okay, that's accomplishable. I can do that. And then the other was a PT who worked with me a lot on the reformer, which is a apparatus in Pilates. And it was so accessible. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, why was this not offered to me? Like, there's so much I can do here. So I completely put that aside. I used it to rehab myself because my goal was to get back to teaching. I wasn't even thinking of it in terms of other patients at the time. I just was like, I want to get back to teaching my classes and my clients. So rehabbed myself with Pilates, went back to teaching, and had kind of been just like in the peripheral reading research that would come out about exercise and movement during cancer treatment. And I had a few friends who I had made in the cancer community message me when I was teaching pretty regularly again, because I'd post about it online. And they would say, I can't wait until the day I'm well enough to take your class. And I was like, why do we have to wait? Like, this could help you now. I don't want you to wait for that day. That day could be now. And then I started thinking, this is something you are literally told by your doctor. This is good for you. But no one ever tells you how. They just say it's good for you. Go on a walk. And let me tell you, I wasn't walking during treatment. I would pass out when I would try and walk. So I could only do anything laying down for a lot of my chemo days. So I was like, there's just got to be something here. And I was reading up on the research and figured out there's a whole world of exercise oncology. And it turns out there are certifications for movement educators called a cancer exercise specialist, and you can learn how to work with people through treatment. I went through this training to become a cancer exercise specialist. Brandy knows I went back and forth on this for the greater part of a year. And working at SFA has been one of the best experiences of my life. Like, there will never be a time where I am not an advocate for the sarcoma community. There will never be a time where I am not working for the sarcoma community, fundraising, connecting people to resources. It's now innately a part of who I am. But I also, there's this other piece of myself that has a lot of knowledge about this. And I am so tired of people feeling like they can't. Like, you already feel like you can't do so much when you're in treatment, but it turns out this is something you can do, and I have the tools to help. And someone had said to me, like, every day you don't do this is a day that somebody doesn't have this service. And I was like, that sucks. I really need to start it then, because it could really help. And I just know for me how much movement has been a piece of vitality. And it's not like movement like lift the biggest weights you can lift. It's movement that helps you engage with your daily life. That is, for me, what movement is. It's a tool, it's a strategy for you to live the life that's right in front of you right now. And that's been my theory going through treatment, is despite the uncertainties and despite the limitations that I face, what is the thing I can do today that allows me to engage with my life in a way that feels full to me in this moment? And that changes every day, but that's the point, is like, a movement can also change and be adapted for you depending on what you need that day. And Pilates specifically is a very rehabilitative source of movement. So I kind of just started pairing all of these things together, and Move Anyway was born.
The thing that is so important about this is in a cancer journey, there is so much that is out of your control as the patient. And this empowers you and gives you some form of control over your body and what is happening to you. And also feeling as if you are contributing in many ways to that journey and to what is happening to your body, because so much it's other people. You're relying on your doctors, you're relying on other people to help you to make decisions. And this is a way that you can feel empowered. And I remember us talking about it. And that's the one thing that stood out to me so vividly when we talked about it and you shared so much about this, was the feeling of being empowered in a situation where that's probably the last thing you feel, and how
Yeah.
important that is for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember during my diagnosis when I could move, I remember saying it was the only time I felt like myself. It was the only time I was connected to myself again. And even if you're not a mover to begin with, using your body in a way that doesn't feel like a science experiment when you're going through treatment is so empowering. And so I have clients in the Move Anyway world where they weren't necessarily doing Pilates before, but it's a tool we use now to help them feel connected to themselves. So it doesn't matter if you were a movement educator of 10 years or this is your first Pilates class ever. And I would say Pilates based because it's all of the things that I know as in part of my education, but I do base it around those principles. So it's just a strategy for you to be engaged with yourself, with your life, with the world around you. Because going back to Move Anyway, the name came from my philosophy throughout treatment, which is live anyway. I have it tattooed on my arm, and it sounds like a very toxic positive phrase, but it was born out of my deep depression and anxiety that resulted at the very end of treatment. I remember about 2 months post sitting on my couch, staring at the wall and thinking, I didn't go through all that to sit here and stare at the wall, but this is all I can do right now. Like, I don't know how to re-engage with my life. They told me to go live, and what the heck does that mean? I was so paralyzed with the fear of what could possibly be ahead, and was like, but I didn't do all of that to just sit here scared. So I guess I got to live anyway. And then I was like, what does that actually mean? And it, to me, means within whatever uncertainties or limitations that you are currently facing today, what is the one thing you can do if tomorrow you ended up in the hospital again or something happened, where you could just look back on the prior day and say, I'm really glad I did that. And like, that is what that meant to me. So like, it wasn't about like YOLO, live, laugh, love. It was really just, how do I take where I am at in this present moment and pick something about it that I can engage with? Literally for the first few weeks post treatment, that looked like going and getting a coffee at the cafe next door or FaceTiming a friend. Some days I wasn't even getting out of bed, but I found something to be engaged with. And then that adapted over time. I was so paralyzed by all of these little things, but it was just picking these little things, and the little things build into bigger things. It doesn't have to be big, but it could be whatever is of value to you in that moment. So Move Anyway is very similarly based around, okay, so what are our fears? What are our limitations? And how can we make movement work for you today? I'm not ever going to put you in a box of movement. I'm going to take movement, unbox it, and make it work for the body you are in today and the place you're in today. There's just so much that we can do, and we can make it as much or as little as you want. And I always tell people, like, breath is movement. Your diaphragm is moving. If you are breathing, you're engaging in movement. And like, to be told that gives you also a permission where you're like, I don't have to go run 5 miles for move, or even walk 3 steps for movement to be considered movement. It took a long time for me to realize that my body wasn't an enemy, even though it was so sick. And I remember feeling incredibly betrayed by my body. And it took a lot of work to realize it was trying to be on my side. And it was just a matter of finding the things that would support it. And I want others to feel that kind of empowerment, because I'm a big believer that what you do on the mat is just representative of how you can engage with your life. So like, the strength you're building in movement is strength you use when you're sitting in the chemo chair and taking that deep breath before they start pushing your meds, and the energy to get up and do it every single day. It's like, if you can cultivate that energy through movement, that's one more day where you wake up tomorrow and say, okay, I can do this again. And that's what I want for people, is just to feel empowered to keep going and to keep engaging with life and getting the most out of every single day that we get.
We often see, and it's portrayed whether you're a cancer patient or not, is you got to get them walk. And sometimes you frankly just cannot. And we feel bad about ourselves when we can't get up and do those things. We feel like there's
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with us. And so the fact that it's adaptable and to meet people where they are, then they can progress, right? But also mentally, that
Mm-hmm.
builds so much mental strength, which goes to what you were just saying is now I can approach my journey differently as well. It's building the mental
Yeah.
strength as well. And also saying it's okay. And it's okay that you can't get up and run 5 miles. Because we've had people on this podcast that said, my thing that got me through was I'd run marathons. But it's different for everyone. And so I think
Right.
that's what's amazing of also of what you're doing is I'm going to meet you where you are, and it's okay where you are. It's okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean if it's something that's important to you, we can't do it. You don't have to do what other people do. We can figure it out for what's important to you. And I'm so glad that you got in because I was going to ask you to talk about how you got the name Move anyway. And I
Yeah.
think that is so important for people to understand.
Move Anywhere isn't just limited to people that are in Boston, right? You
No, it's
do
all over.
virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yes, I do in-person sessions with people, but I do also do virtual private sessions. It is the next thing to launch, but there's an on-demand piece launching, and there will be a section of on-demand that I'm calling the Caregiver's Corner, because I know from the caregivers that I've had the blessing of working with through SFA and through my own life, they are such a part of this experience. Like, you can't go through a sarcoma diagnosis without them, and they need so much support too. So just really inclusive of everybody.
I love how it was such a big part of you before, and then you've evolved it through your journey, and then now it's still a big part of you. I just love that about your story.
Thank you. Yeah, that feels very special.
Knowing you, I know there's so much more that we could talk about. And I know as you continue to co host the podcast, more will come out about your journey. But we always ask a couple of final questions. So we will. What advice would you give people listening to the podcast today?
Definitely live anyway. And again, it's a reminder to not be focused on the toxic positivity, but the reminder to just choose one thing every day to put in front of you and say, this is what's important to me today. I'm going to make sure I do that. Because you need to have your why in the front of your mind. And that why could shift every single day, but picking your why for that day as a human being, it's difficult to get up every day and do life. Whenever you are given anything hard, you have to put that in front of you. And I think the other piece of advice is help the people around you help you. I feel like that was my philosophy working with my team and advocating for myself, is help them help you. Communicate. It can be so scary to tell them how you feel. Work together. It's just the piece of self-advocacy that I've found really helpful and has brought me very close to my team. And we have a relationship where they know when to react and when to calm me. And that allows me to trust myself more. At the end of the day, you are the person who is best equipped to help yourself. You know yourself best. You have to listen to yourself, and no one's going to do it but you. Everyone's there to help you, but you have to drive it a lot of the times. And then, of course, move anyway.
I was hoping you were going to say that. And how can people get in touch with you now?
Yeah, so my personal Instagram, which is chock full of my reflections of the cancer journey, is, which I hate that phrase, cancer journey, cringing using it. There's just not a good name in the dictionary. So if someone has something better, give it to me. But at Tasha Nathan _ and this will all be linked in the show notes. And then Move Anyway is a great place to get in touch with me, which is at Move Anyway _ hello at move-anyway.com, and the website is move-anyway.com, which is brand new for me to say. So that's exciting.
And instead of calling it your cancer journey, maybe just call it your life journey because it's just a part of your
So
life. Yeah, just a part of your
you're
life.
right.
It's
Mic
just a
drop,
part of.
Brandy. It's just
Well, I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being a co-host with you, Natasha. And I will still at times come in and be a guest host when needed, but things have transitioned for me as the CEO of SFA. My schedule gets very busy, and it now is a perfect time for me to transition more of a full-time co-host role over to Katie, who I'm very excited to hand this over to. And Tasha, first time I'm calling you Tasha, I did that on purpose. I always
I
call her
know that's
Natasha.
crazy.
I did that on
You
purpose.
and my dad are the only ones who call me Natasha.
I'm excited that they will continue to move Sarcoma Stories forward and share more of these amazing and unique and very individual journeys with you through the Sarcoma Stories podcast. And again, I look forward to the times where I'll be able to come in and be a guest host because I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing the stories and having these conversations. But more to come, and I know how much you will enjoy Katie and Natasha moving us forward. So thank you for sharing and being so open and honest today, Natasha. You have an amazing story, and I am so happy that it has come full circle for you.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your support and co-hosting with me for the past, is it a year and a half now? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And just being a part of my life story. I'm so grateful. And I'm looking forward to hosting with Katie. Thank you both so much for having me today.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. Did this episode resonate with you? You can join the discussion about this episode in our Sarcoma Stories Facebook group, linked in the show notes. If you found this podcast helpful, your feedback is incredibly valuable and helps to create more awareness about sarcoma while sharing vital resources with someone who may need it. Be sure to leave a rating and review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.